Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for a cabinet meeting, huh?
Alexander Hamilton is one of the most important people in the economic history of the United States and possibly the world. And since at Market Power, we believe in the power of markets and economics to shape our world, I wanted to spend some time talking about Hamilton. I'm going to be breaking down Cabinet Battle #1 and showing you the amazing economic details that are in there. And a lot of these things are hidden, but when you understand them, they help you understand just how brilliant this song is and the role that this has in explaining our economic history.
You could have been anywhere in the world tonight, but you're here with us in New York City.
So this first cabinet battle is taking place in New York City, which was the location of the Capitol. This is going to be important for details later on in the song and the entire play.
The issue on the table: Secretary Hamilton's plan to assume state debt.
So this debate is about two parts of Hamilton's financial plan: the federal government assuming state debts and the establishment of a national bank. Most of the song is going to focus on assuming state debts. This omits another really important part of Hamilton's financial plan because it happened before Jefferson got there. And this was how they were going to pay people who held these debts. It's a super important debate and it established a precedent for financial markets today. It's also where Hamilton sounds the most like an economist, and parts of it are just really interesting, the arguments that he's making. I don't want to dive into it on this part because it's not really part of this song, but I'm willing to make a whole nother video about that first part of Hamilton's financial plan. So if you are interested in that, let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe so that way you can see if I make that video.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We fought for these ideals, we shouldn't settle for less.
So this part has nothing to do with economics, but I just love how Lin-Manuel Miranda was able to incorporate some of these themes into these songs. It just, man, what a great job. He's brilliant. I love it.
But Hamilton forgets his plan would have the government assume state debts.
The plan was for the federal government, this new government established by the Constitution, to take over the war-related debts from the states.
Now place your bets as to who that benefits. The very seat of government where Hamilton sits.
Not true.
And this was a key sticking point for a lot of these politicians, was that assuming those state debts would then benefit the federal government. That's why Hamilton wanted to do it. He wanted the federal government to be a little bit stronger. And there were people like Jefferson who were doubtful about having a stronger federal government.
Our debts are paid, I'm afraid. Don't tax the South because we got it made in the shade.
So this is the other opposition to this financial plan, and the bigger one. This was a much bigger deal. And that was by the federal government assuming state debts, there were going to be some big winners and some big losers from this deal. And Virginia was going to be a big loser. Virginia had paid off much of its debt, but there were states like Massachusetts who had massive debts left over, and that was going to be a plan that really benefited Massachusetts and essentially make Virginia and other states like Virginia pay for Massachusetts' debt. And this was a huge sticking point for those states that had already paid down a lot of their debt. They were saying, if we've already paid our debts, why should we be bearing the debts of Massachusetts?
Oh, if the shoe fits, wear it. If New York's in debt, why should Virginia bear it?
Hamilton's argument was that these debts had been taken to fight this war for independence, and that everybody in the country benefited from that war. Virginia was getting just as much benefit from Massachusetts' debt as Massachusetts was. And he was saying, if everybody's benefiting from the war, and Massachusetts ended up fighting a lot of really important points of the war, that everybody should be paying for those benefits. So he believed that everybody should be sharing the cost of this huge benefit that everyone was enjoying by having independence from England. I think this is a really important detail, and it's not answered in this song, so hopefully you understand the reason why Hamilton thinks that Virginia should bear debts from other states is because Virginia is getting the benefit of what those debts created.
This financial plan is an outrageous demand, and it's too many damn pages for any man to understand.
So reading this financial plan is actually one of the first assignments I give my students, and they would 100% agree with Jefferson that it is way too hard to understand. It's pretty tough. Report on Public Credit, go look it up. It's great, but it is really hard to understand.
When Britain taxed our tea, we got frisky. Imagine what gon' happen when you try to tax our whiskey.
This is probably my favorite part of the song because the allusions here are so potent and so relevant today. So obviously what Jefferson's saying here is when Britain taxed our tea, we got frisky, right? Like that's an allusion to the Boston Tea Party, a key moment of independence. And yeah, like, hey, taxes happen, people revolt. But then he says, imagine what's gonna happen when you try to tax our whiskey. This is a reference to the Whiskey Rebellion, which extended from 1791 to 1794. Now, there was a bunch of Western regions, mostly Western Pennsylvania, but still Kentucky, Western parts of Virginia. A lot of them were fighting this whiskey tax. There had been a tax on whiskey to pay for these debts. And a lot of people were resisting this. And the resistance was like really rough. There were people grabbing tax collectors, tarring them, and then covering them in feathers because they refused to pay this tax. And it got to the point in 1794 where Washington said, enough is enough. We are going to make you pay this tax. And he gets something like 13,000 troops, marches on to Western Pennsylvania to take on these protesters and say, we established this tax. This is what our country was built on, was taxation and representation. Guess what? We have elected officials. We say we're gonna have a tax. You will pay that tax. Marches on them, no conflict because people scatter, and that really solidifies this new government and shows that they have the power to do what they say they're going to do. We call this state capacity, and I see this as a key moment of establishing the American government's state capacity. And this is, like, if you don't know about the Whiskey Rebellion, I recommend going to check it out because it is this really nice counterpart to the Boston Tea Party. I love that he references it in this song.
If we assume the debts the union gets, a new line of credit, a financial diuretic.
Hamilton really wanted this line of credit. This is what the whole report was on. The financial plan was called A Report on Public Credit. He was really interested in making sure that the government had access to credit, to debt, if it needed it. And he believed that this was going to be important for stimulating the economy.
How do you not get it? If we're aggressive and competitive, the union gets a boost. You'd rather give it a sedative?
And Hamilton is really focused on this because he wants the whole world to understand that if they lend money to America, that they will be paid back. He wants to establish this, so getting this debt is going to be one way of establishing that line of credit. Another thing he wants is for the rich people in the country to be invested in the success of the country. This debt was going to be held mostly by rich Americans, right? And the way you get rich Americans in line with the new government is for them to have a financial stake in it. You will only be paid back on this debt if this country survives. So you better be invested in the survival of this country. He wanted them to have skin in the game.
When you got skin in the game, you stay in the game.
Rich Americans would have skin in the game for this new country, and they would want to have this country succeed.
Your debts are paid because you don't pay for labor.
This part of the song, I feel like, is a little anachronistic because, you know, we're giving this like, oh, the South had slaves, but this is 1791 that I think this debate is going on. The North had slaves too at this point. In fact, New York was one of the most important slave communities in the North. Like, that's why I said it was important to remember that this debate was taking place in New York City, because New York City had one of the highest densities of slaves in the entire country. And the reason why is because slaves are really expensive. We know that there were people in the North who wanted slaves, but they couldn't afford them. That the South had more profitable agriculture to afford slaves. And the only places that could afford slaves in the North were like large markets that were connected to lots of other markets, so people could make a lot of money off of trade rather than agriculture, which is why New York City was such an important area for slaves in the North.
Plant seeds in the South, we create, they keep ranting. We know who's really doing the planting.
Hamilton was very anti-slavery. He was an abolitionist. He was a man ahead of his time. But there would have been a lot of people in New York City that would have been totally fine with slave labor. So it's kind of weird to have this debate going on in this part of the song.
Damn, you were worse shape than the national debt is in.
And the rest of the song doesn't really have many like key economic points, but does have that great line that's a callback to the "if the shoe fits, wear it."
Hey, turn around, bend over, I'll show you where my shoe fits.
Man, that's just great writing, clever stuff. I love Hamilton. I hope you guys are excited that it's now on Disney Plus. You should go ahead and check out the video I did on the Boston Tea Party and what really happened, the economics behind it. If you're interested in other videos, go ahead and check out this playlist that I'm putting up, and be sure to subscribe, because here at Market Power, we are creating a community of people interested in and excited about economics. If you like Hamilton, you're probably part of that community. We'll see you next time.